Before we get into this episode, a quick thank you to the brands that make Master Integrator possible. This episode is brought to you by ADI Global, formerly Snap One, your one-stop partner for professional integration. ADI brings together powerhouse brands like Control4, Arachnus, Binary and Strong, along with a carefully curated range of distributed products, all under one roof. And they back it up with genuine integrator-first support from system design through to installation and beyond. They're focused on helping you deliver smarter, more reliable projects, because when you win, they win. If you want to learn more, give the team a call on 1800 990 548. We're also supported by Sonance, the benchmark in architectural audio. This episode is brought to you by Blaze by Sonance. Blaze is a high-efficiency amplification platform built for the demands of modern residential and commercial installs. Onboard DSP, flexible connectivity, and the kind of output that lets you deliver a genuinely great audio experience without overcomplicating the rack. If you want precision and scalability in an amp solution that actually integrates cleanly, Blaze is worth a serious look. Sonance is available exclusively in Australia through Amber Technology. Now, if you're looking for serious design firepower behind your next project, let me introduce you to Colosseum. Colosseum is a white label design and documentation partner built specifically for integrators, specialising in cinema and media room design, lighting control, and automation engineering. And their new Spark program is a big deal. If your vendor is Spark enabled, you can unlock Colosseum designed cinemas at nearly half the usual cost. Lower upfront investment, immersive 3D walkthroughs, faster sales conversations. Colosseum really is the design and documentation wingman you didn't know you needed. Hello and welcome to Master Integrator, the podcast dedicated to the business of smart home and building integration. I'm your host, Paul Skelton. I want to start this episode with a question that comes up a lot in our industry. One that sounds almost philosophical, but has real practical consequences for every integrator running a business. What happens when the product you've built your entire business around simply ceases to exist? My guest today knows the answer to that better than most. He's been in the space for nearly 2 decades, and early on he backed a platform whose manufacturer ceased to exist almost overnight. Rather than walking away, he used it as a forcing function, to look seriously at open standard protocols as a layer of insurance, regardless of what else sits in a system. That pivot led him deep into KNX and open standard building automation. And today, through Zennio, his company supplies KNX and other open protocol products to system integrators across Australia. On the integration side, through Tecport, his team has been doing the hard yards on real projects, stitching together lighting, HVAC, access control, security, and more into genuinely unified systems. In this conversation, we get into systems thinking, the politics of multi-trade coordination, maintenance as a revenue model, wall acne, and why he's not afraid of DIY devices. Actually, he welcomes them. Before we get into it, a huge thank you to the sponsors who make this show possible. ADI Global, Australia and New Zealand's leading distributor of security, AV, and smart home products. If you're not already working with ADI, you should be. Head to adiglobal.com. Sonance, distributed through Amber Technology. World-class architectural audio. If you want speakers that disappear into the architecture but sound extraordinary, Sonance is the answer. Find out more at ambertech.com.au. Colosseum, the design and documentation wingman you didn't know you needed. When you want the best, Colosseum is there to help. Visit colosseum.io. And Connected Magazine, the must-read publication for our industry. Stay informed, stay relevant. connectedmag.com.au. Now on with the show. This is Master Integrator. Here's Peter Milojkovic. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having us on, mate. Much appreciated.
Yeah, so let's start with a bit about your background and the companies that you run here in Australia. So obviously there's probably 2 companies that are really in play with Tecport and Zennio. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and where the companies kind of sit in the market?
Sure. So Zennio is purely a distribution sort of arm that supplies products to system integrators, reliable quality products. Obviously, in our infancy, our intent was always just to sell pure product. But when we started out, the market was just non-existent, especially for the protocol that we use, which is predominantly KNX. But prior to that, when we first started out, we went with another product, which was more of a vendor specific product, which wasn't supported by multiple vendors. But that vendor obviously ceased to exist, and we got caught out in the early days, which was sort of a bit of a lucky streak, I suppose, because it really made us look at products and that are non-vendor specific from even from a point of view, if you're running a business and your main key product supplier goes, you need to have some options. So that's why a lot of these protocols that are coming around are very, very key nowadays. Like you've got DALI for lighting, for example. Ethernet's a standard protocol across things. So we just tend to look at things that are going to stick around and are supported by multiple vendors. So moving forward, we just stuck with the protocol we stuck with. We started to integrate sort of against our will, if you will, and then that arm of the business sort of just started to expand, and then finally, when people were catching wind of being a bit more open in protocols, the product arm started to take off as well. Ideally, we never set out to go down the path of integration, but we sort of got into that a little bit, and it's we're trying to step away from it where we can, and hand that over to competent integrators, and always looking to train and support and provide know-how to the guys that are willing to learn. Obviously, there's always some elements that are tricky, but you try and overcome what you can with the equipment you've got at the time.
You've been in the market for a little while now too. So how long have you been in there? And I guess also been based in Adelaide? Because to be honest, I actually don't hear very much coming out of Adelaide. So I'm wondering how you've seen that market kind of evolve over time too, being right in the middle of it.
Sure. I mean, we've been operating for now almost 18 years. I think it's coming on. In the early days, it was very difficult. So the smartphones were just starting to become the norm. Prior to that, it was tough going. But the minute the smartphones started to come out, that's when we saw the market start to elevate. Prior to that, it was very difficult. And the smartphone allowed people to be connected with their homes, which in the early days, nobody placed much value on it or understood what it meant. Whereas nowadays, everyone's got some sort of device that's app connected in their house. Be it an air conditioner, be it some security cameras, be it whatever. It allows people to feel connected with what's theirs, gives them a sense of security, a sense of well-being, and now it's just starting to move from one to the next. You see the same evolution in everything, I suppose, even in motor vehicles. I mean, if you go to buy a car now, you're going to be hard up to find a car that doesn't have power windows. Like, you're going to be hard up, whereas in the old days, if you had to wind a window, you'd be like, oh my gosh, what's going on here, So, everything that was once a luxury becomes the norm. And I guess we're going to see the same thing happen in the home space.
I know. So obviously we look then at those kind of big points in time. I mean, this year is 20 years for me in the industry as well. And like you said, I mean, when I first started, it was only rich and famous clients. And
yes.
I remember when the iPad came in, it completely changed control interfaces. So from what you're seeing now, are you seeing technologies or trends coming through that you think will be major players and shift the market significantly? Or really are we in that evolution of small steps?
It's an evolving market, and it constantly is evolving at the moment. There's so much stuff out there now that it does get overwhelming, to be honest. And it's hard as someone that's in this space to keep on top of everything. You try and investigate a few things here and there, but it's hard to just keep abreast of everything that's going on. In my opinion, the key things that, we look for, like I said, is just that open standard, whatever it is, be it, in the lighting space, you've got DALI, which will be a big, big winner in my opinion. KNX is something we use, which will be, it's a huge advantage in my opinion. You've got the visualization layer, which is, what we deem as the phone control or the app that sort of manages the house. In our minds, we always tend to split the physical hardware that's in the space or in the home or in the building, and then the visualization becomes a separate element. But you need to be able to bolt on whatever systems you want to work together. This is key. So the vendors or the brands that allow for that and accommodate that, I think will be the ones that should come out pretty strong in the end, in my opinion.
So obviously, you've mentioned KNX there a couple of times. I mean, obviously, it's a massive standard in Europe where it started, and I do remember when Ian Richardson was the chairman of the local KNX group, trying to get it to be an official standard in Australia. And I know I'm surprised he didn't turn to alcohol, because I saw him what he went through for that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, from your perspective then, because that was a few years ago, how has that protocol evolved? Because obviously it's designed to be open protocol and open to everyone, but is there much evolution in how, I guess, suppliers are working with KNX, or what products they're developing around it, or really is it just kind of that tried and true product set that they're pushing with?
Look, I think the standard is the norm. I mean, it's got a set of parameters or set of data points that everyone sticks to, and those data points, they expand and as new data points are required. So it could be some other set of something that they add to the standard. But what we see is that we're seeing a lot of vendors have gateways in their products to the KNX. You've got your Control 4s, your RTIs. All of these major brands are starting to go, right, we need to at least on ramp to this somehow, and have some connectivity to it. And the beauty for like all of these different standards is that it allows them to then get a vendor specific gateway for it. Could be an air conditioner or something like that, and then have that integrated to their product. So it gives them a greater scope, and it makes their visualization device more compatible with more elements that it wasn't prior. Because for one vendor to try and gateway to the amount of products that are out there is just it would just be a mission impossible. So having this thing in between is I think it helps everyone.
Yeah, this kind of then loops into one of the things I wanted to talk to you about around this idea of systems thinking, because there are a lot of integrators out there still who they treat their projects like a device by device basis. They don't necessarily look at the overarching design, which I know to some people design is still a dirty word, which is a bit confusing. But in your mind, then, where does systems thinking come into this, and what is systems thinking? But when we're talking about an open protocol, for example, why is systems thinking the smarter approach than doing it as a device by device mindset?
Well, just to elaborate there, systems thinking. So in my opinion, and this is the way I look at things, is traditionally each trade takes care of their own element. So if you go into like a commercial space, for example, the lighting guys will just look after the lighting. The ventilation guys and HVAC guys would just do the HVAC. The access control guys would just do the access control. All of these systems they're fragmented. They're all separate. Whereas if you can get all these systems onto a common platform, these systems can influence one another and help one another operate more efficiently and just better in the space. Room occupancy, you can use access control to help determine that. The room occupancy can also adjust how the air conditioner behaves or the ventilation behaves in a space, rather than having to separate all these systems. So, getting all these systems onto something more like a common platform helps a system integrator achieve more of what is expected in a building nowadays than what used to be. So increased comfort, easier operation for the client, energy efficiency for the building owner, health benefits from a point of view of it could be like CCT lighting control, like, different color temperatures throughout the day, etc. It could be air quality, with ventilation in the space based on occupancy. There's all these fine lines that you have to walk on now. It's not just about comfort; it's also about energy. You've got more than one person to please, I guess, in a commercial space. In a residential space, it's a little bit different. The occupant, the homeowner typically just wants to be comfortable, and some care about energy, some don't. So it just depends on the type of project you're in. Some of these projects you can imagine, customers don't really mind about spending the extra money on energy. They're not fazed by it, but some customers are sensitive.
So I guess with that in mind, obviously, when we're talking about integrators needing to deal with other trades, deal with other systems outside of what they might have traditionally worked with, I guess at the same time, we're not really saying to them, though, you need to go out and become an electrician or you need to go out and become an HVAC guy, are you? You're basically saying you just need to know how to work with those trades.
Yeah, look, and this is the hard thing. Do you know what I mean? Because the minute you get all of these elements, onto a common platform, the person or the integrator needs to have a bit of knowledge on all of these things. And this is what makes it so difficult, because, you're not going to have the level of understanding of the HVAC installer. But, look, the more you do these things over time, you definitely learn. And look, some errors get made, like, that's a given. But as long as you learn from those errors and you can overcome them in your programming, you can tend to make things better at the end. And then sometimes on the next project you do, you'll think, we should have done it this way. And you'll speak to the HVAC integrator or the HVAC installer and say, hey, can we implement this? It might be installing an extra zone motor or something like that to achieve better control over something. But look, it is this. What you're referring to is a major difficult thing. So for a HVAC installer to be able to come back later and service the system, I mean, this is just such a simple thing. But when this system is bolted onto your gateway and it's managed by the building management system or the home control system, the HVAC installer shows up and he goes, oh, what's this app? I've never seen this. I've only seen a generic wall controller. I don't know what this is. So when we do installations, we tend to think about, hey, where could he bolt on his traditional controller so he can then determine what's going on with his system and service it, and same with other trades that need to do their bits and pieces as well. But this is definitely a difficult one to overcome, and you've got to try and be as accommodating as you can.
Is there a natural starting point for an integrator who is kind of moving towards this kind of overarching mindset, especially if, they've always been an AV guy, for example, and never really done much outside of that? I mean, it can, as you said, it can be quite daunting to then look at it and think, I need to understand HVAC or electrical systems. So how do they do that?
Yeah, look, this is again great question and difficult. Look, I myself was heavy into AV. This is where most people tend to come from. I think just ease into one system at a time. Don't get too crazy. So we obviously eased into lighting first. That was the first element. Then slowly the air conditioning comes along and you start going into that space. But I just think one step at a time, and try and keep things really, really simple where possible. Try not to overcomplicate, especially on the on your first few jobs. Just the smaller the project, the better. It could. We even started doing a lot of just simple floor heating projects, for example, with hydronic floor heating. This was this turned out to be a huge market for us as well. And these are just very simple thermostatic control jobs. But yeah, it's just ease into it one thing at a time and just undertake some training. Obviously, if integrators need to lean on us for anything, and they often have in the past, we're obviously happy to assist. There are always limitations. You sometimes the actual design of the system that's being installed and the building does matter. And you can't overcome absolutely everything with a controls package. But if something's poorly designed, it's sometimes hard to overcome. But yeah, my advice would just be one step at a time, and just there's nothing wrong with getting some devices on a bench and pre-programming them and seeing how they operate. I mean, that's a really good way to learn too.
So I'm wondering, in your process then, when you were kind of getting up to speed with the other trades that you were working with, how big of a job or how important was it then for you to actually almost educate the other trades as well about integration? Or was that kind of second tier to what you were doing? Because you mentioned there the HVAC guy coming in, not knowing the app.
Sure. So look, these guys, they don't care. So the only time they care is when there's a problem. Okay. So, what we tend to with a lot of the HVAC guys, the biggest thing you overcome and they'll praise you for is just temperature regulation. So, for example, in the KNX realm, obviously a lot of the light switches have temperature sensors inside, so we can take averages of rooms, etc., to increase comfort levels. Like the minute you can send this information to the air conditioning unit, the HVAC guy is excited. Do you know what I mean? It's like, the customer's complaining it's too cold, too hot, it can't get to the right temperature. Their controller gets decommissioned or whatever. You send your actual room temperatures from the light switches to the system, and the customer's happy, and the HVAC guy's going, "Oh, thank you very much for helping me out." But apart from that, there's not much they want to learn about. All they want to know about is putting their air conditioner in and getting the hell out of there. This is what I shouldn't say that about all trades, but this is what we tend to find most of the time. It's hard because the customer interacts with the app, and I mean, every integrator is going to know this, it doesn't matter what the fault is. I mean, the minute it's not clicking on that screen, they're on the phone to you. There's no two which ways about it, because it's your app, they're straight onto you. But this has its, good and bad points. It was funny. I had an electrician once say to me, "Oh, who wants a customer calling them back all the time?" It's like, well, I mean, this is repeat business. Like, if there's a problem and you can go in and fix it, it's a chargeable thing. Maintenance contracts, etc., with us are starting to become more commonplace. So, it's definitely an avenue for more work. And if you're top of mind when something happens, I mean, that's I don't see that as a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest thing that comes up when I do talk to electricians who are saying they're going to move into the integration space, and it is a misunderstanding of the fact they need to change their entire business model, because it's now going to an after service, it's going to maintenance contracts. So I guess, since you brought up maintenance contracts there, and this is something that I do talk to a lot of integrators about, how important have they been to your business from the integration side in actually growing?
Look, it is important, but to be honest, we've only stumbled across this space in the last couple of years. Do you know what I mean? But prior to that, you'd be very reactive. So, an alarm battery goes flat and it would be like, oh, the customer's panel's beeping and it's got a fault, and then you'd send a tech out there to change it. Whereas then it's like, well, hang on, there's an opportunity here. Every couple of years an alarm battery needs to be replaced. Some firmware updates need to be done. There's also alarm monitoring, which is another good element of the business. And even if you're an integrator and you're building a business, I mean, these are ongoing revenue streams that are, that are good for your business. But I feel maintenance is very important, and also as a company and as the customer sees you, being proactive rather than reactive is always a much better thing. It just makes you look better. You can see issues, you can see faults, prior to them happening. I think it's just an important thing to make your business better.
Have you seen a shift in mindset around maintenance contracts? I feel like I've been talking about maintenance contracts for 20 years, but it still seems to be, I guess, unknown or unexplored by a lot of integrators out there. But from what you're seeing, are you seeing more people adopt them, or is it still very early days and slow?
It's still early, but there are some people out there that actually expect them. Like they're surprised that it's not in your initial offering. At the end of the day, nothing lasts forever. I mean, you buy a car, you've got to constantly get it serviced. You put all this infrastructure into a home or a building, it's got to be maintained. So nothing comes with zero maintenance, even though people like to think it does. But it's definitely a tough one. But at the end of the day, if you don't phrase it as a maintenance contract, if you phrase it as we're coming every 2 years to replace your alarm battery and we'll do a systems check, the customer finds that a lot more palatable than, here, it's a maintenance contract. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you're offering something, even if it's something small, it tends to be a lot more palatable for the customer than just saying, you're signing up to this maintenance contract. And the other thing is to make it optional. It doesn't need to be you must do this. Do you know what I mean? But when the customer starts to ring you for things, sometimes it's hard to know where to draw the line as an integrator and say, hey, you're ringing me quite a few times now. Let's be reasonable here. You need to start sort of saying, hey, some of this might start to be chargeable, but this is always a fine line. It's always a fine line.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously you said too about it being potential revenue generator. And if I look at what's happening, well, to a degree all around the country, but particularly here in Victoria, where I'm based, there's 2 or 3 integrators who are completely, run off off the grid. They're doing all the jobs, and there's a lot sitting around at the moment struggling to get work. And there's a lot of reasons for that, the state of the economy in Victoria and so on. But I think that's where things like the maintenance contracts come in to really show their worth.
Yeah, it just gives you that baseline, turnover, I guess, which is very handy. But what you'll tend to find is in the end game, you'll probably have to have a crew that's just responsible for purely going around and doing maintenance. Once your project volume gets big enough. But like I said, it's a good thing. It's definitely a good thing to have. And security is something we also stumbled across that was something that we never intended to get involved with. But security monitoring, security is a huge, security and climate are probably the 2 biggest elements that people look at with these systems. That's for sure. So yeah.
For more than 20 years, Connected Magazine has been the leading voice for the Australian AV and custom integration industry, and it continues to hold that position today. Commercial and residential integrators can head to Connected Magazine or connectedmag.com.au for the latest news, new products, and deeper insight into where the industry is heading. To learn more, head to the website. The link is in this episode's description, or have a chat with the team next time you see them at a trade show or local event. So if we go back to systems thinking for a moment, and we then look at, the whole process, practically speaking, how do you actually take systems thinking into mind at the start of a project? Is it something that you have to factor in from the very beginning and almost factor that into your timeline if you are working with other trades? So how do you actually roll that out even from as early as design?
So look, the design is key because, you look at a traditional home, let's talk resi because, it's the majority of what we do. But, you can eliminate a lot of, what I tend to refer to as like wall acne, for example. So, lots of switches, lots of controllers, lots of bits and pieces. That's just a start, but the design is key. So, for example, areas that are just thoroughfare, you'll get onto motion sensors that they would have day and night mode, for example. If you eliminate the need for wall switches in those spaces, you still need to keep things very simple. So, with what we try and do is we always try and have a automated element and then a traditional element to everything that we do. So, a light should be able to be operated from a light switch as well as a sensor or a smart device that should operate on both planes. A front door lock, for example, trying to use, we try and avoid batteries where we can, but, we prefer the use of a electric strike in the frame versus a, battery operated device in the actual door itself. Because the customer can still put a key in the lock and turn it and go in there. And then they've still obviously got the benefit of being able to electronically open the door with a strike. So it's all these elements. Intercom, for example, is another thing we see. A lot of people get caught out on. They put a Ring doorbell at the front, but there's no traditional method of having a screen inside to actually speak to someone at the door. If your phone's not near you, you miss the intercom. So we just try and double down on all of these, but reducing clutter is what we tend to find is a big one. What people often end up with on their wall in their main living area, for example, is you'll have like an intercom, air conditioning controller, underfloor heating controller, a couple of light switches, some remote controllers for the blinds, a controller for the ceiling fan. It just looks like just horrible. So trying to streamline all of these things for the customer is good too, because if they have an app and they want to set a timer, it's the same way to set a timer on an air conditioner as it is to set it on a light, as it is to set it on any element of the house. So they don't have to go to one app to set a timer one way and then another app to set a timer another way. It just tends to streamline things for the customer and make it a lot more user friendly, I suppose. And then the amount of reduced clutter on the walls is just in my opinion, is a big bonus. I think it really elevates a lot of these minimalist design homes nowadays. Trying to reduce, and the technology just keeps increasing. It doesn't go down. So it definitely helps bring it all together and minimize the amount of clutter. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it seems to be one of those things that seems so simple of a concept, and yet it really does have a dramatic impact on the actual end user and their experience with technology.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, like I said, just being able to, and you'll have some customers that are, there might be some customers that are pro, HomeKit, for example, and they get familiar with that ecosystem, or but whatever the visualization is that your customer likes, if you can provide that to them, that's great. And then once they get used to using it, everything becomes second nature to them, whether it's a light or an air conditioner or turning on the garden lights or locking a door at a specific time. It's all set up in the same way. There's not they don't need to know 5-10 different apps to try and to get these things to happen, which in my opinion is a big deal.
And I guess it comes back to as one of the buzzwords in the industry at the moment, but that is this idea of human-centric design, which again seems like such a common sense concept, and yet it seems to have really revolutionized the way people have talked about design. So I guess from your experience, has that changed how you approach system design, this concept of human-centric design, or really was it just already elevating what most people tend to already do?
Well, like I said, in my opinion, the human-centric element is to try and make things simpler for the occupant. And I believe that all this technology leans towards that. It's just the level at which you want to do it. So we are having projects now where people are becoming not just security conscious but more health conscious. So like there's lights that follow your circadian rhythm, so they'll change color temperature from the morning to the evening. So we're seeing, we've done a couple of projects like that nowadays. There's customers with air quality requirements. So there'll be ventilation systems that are set up. So all this stuff is an automated process based on occupancy, and this is all benefiting the occupant. Well, so in my opinion, it's more human centric. Turning lights on and off for customers in spaces. This is such a sort of a feature that's taken for granted, but customers, it's funny, they move into the home and they're traveling down hallways and lights just come on at a nice comfortable level for them as they transit through, and then they'll go into a house without it, and it's like, wow, I didn't realize it's quite nice having that, like it's it's definitely all the elements that we provide, I feel are human centric focused, if that makes sense.
So if you then look at the fact that we're talking about systems thinking, so we're talking about everything from system design, we're talking about navigating other trades, obviously finding product and testing product and finding staff. The role of the integrator it's big. at the moment,
But
and
yeah, it is.
it's definitely grown over the years. Do you think it's going to continue to expand at the same rate, or surely there must be a tipping point where something changes and it's too much for one trade to do?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I guess with the way the technology is moving, I'm hoping that the manufacturers will get smarter in the way they design products to allow it to cover a greater scope of uh, you know of elements in a project. But again, it's so difficult when the integrator is responsible for a great amount on a project, and it's almost in my opinion sometimes it gets a little bit overwhelming, a little bit too much. But it's I I guess it's going to increase. I hope it doesn't increase much further. Um, but sometimes in a company, if what's nice to do is try and split elements up. So you might have a certain staff member that specializes in these 3 or 4 elements, and another one that specializes in these 3 or 4 elements, and try and spread the load a little bit, and not have that sole person try and be responsible for everything. If they need a bit of advice, they can lean on the other person for that. But it's definitely a lot to grasp and a lot to be mindful of, being an integrator for sure. So yeah, in short, hopefully it's not going to get too much worse, but yeah, I hope that technology will help us overcome the amount of things that we do have to be responsible for.
Are there things that you either do within your company or that you've seen out there that you think could actually make an integrator's life easier today that a lot of them might not be familiar with or currently using?
Um, Look, what we tend to find is just the sharing of information is sort of a key thing, I guess. Just having a common repository for plans and changes, so where staff can just log in and see what's going on a project is important. But obviously, it's also you have to give staff a little bit of a hard time if they get a bit lazy and do not update that. So look, the handling of the information and keeping everyone on the same page, I think is probably the most major key element on these projects. On these more luxury homes, a lot of things tend to get changed on the fly, and keeping abreast of it is definitely difficult. And this is where just that communication element and keeping the information up to date is probably the biggest element. I think very important.
Yeah, and I'd say building on that too, just sharing information within the industry. I mean, I know when I first started, everyone would actually get together and talk about what they were working on and help each other out. But it seems to have had a little bit of a shift now where there's a bit more of a protectionist mindset around what people are doing.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's changed.
I agree with you. Everyone works so hard to overcome the issues that they have, and then it's hard to share that information. Because you've stressed over it, you've done your bit, and it's like, well, why should I just give that to anyone? But I think more of it does need to happen. We try and be pretty open, and obviously we in the sale of pure raw product, if people need a hand, we tend to help, be it with some programming or the way we would suggest to set it up, and we can even go back to the manufacturer and see what they would recommend. But we try to be as helpful as we can. But I guess you are right. It's one of those fields where everyone has their bit of proprietary know-how, and they like to keep a hold of it. And look, that is understandable in my opinion. It's definitely they've worked hard to get there, and they want to try and keep their little bit. But for the industry to grow as a whole, I think you're probably right. I mean, it does need a bit more sharing and caring.
So where do you think we are headed? Say over the next 5 years. Obviously, a lot's changed over the past 20 or probably 30 that the industry has actually really existed. But where are we going?
Look, I think I definitely can't see it slowing down. I think if anything, homes are going to become more digital. I mean, the level of integration is going to be higher. I just want it to be simplified. We're sort of starting to, go back to, I wouldn't say back to basics, but just trying to simplify things a little bit more and reduce complexity and try and not let customers get too carried away with what they want, and just try and reel them in a little bit, because at the end of the day, we've had projects where you'll have a customer who's overly technical, and if you'll want fancy gadgets everywhere, and you need to think about if that customer has a guest and the guest shows up and they're struggling to turn a light on in a space, I mean, as an integrator, I mean, I think you've failed. So you've just got to be very mindful of not overcomplicating these projects. And a lot of us as integrators, we favour the technology. We're like, oh, well, this looks pretty exciting. Let's implement this, and we'll put touchscreens everywhere, and it'll be all fancy. And then an occupant shows up to use the space. A guy that's not tech savvy sees a touchscreen and just goes, oh, I don't know what to do with that. So, and I mean, this is a big thing to overcome, especially for us in the hotel space. I often, if we program a project, we'll get a staff member of a hotel or something to go in and use the space and just say, hey, use the space. Does it feel like it's usable to you? Is there something that's tripping you up? Get that feedback as an integrator. It definitely helps try and go, right, okay, this is what the person's going to perceive. And if 3 or 4 people are perceiving it, then you've got to take that, hey, this is what people think the function should do, and this is how you need to make it operate. But yeah, those sorts of things definitely help out. But yeah, the future, in my opinion, is definitely it's definitely on the rise. It's definitely not slowing down. So, and it's also in the energy space as well. With energy, it's a big thing too. And these systems, can have quite an effect on energy, especially through management of climate in these spaces.
So I'm wondering then, with everything that is happening in terms of resources, I mean, I'm spending a lot of time trying to build an apprenticeship program at the moment, but that still takes time. So I'm wondering from what you're seeing in the market, and particularly in South Australia, resourcing, finding, technicians, how difficult is it?
Yeah, very, 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 especially, it is. Look, it's a space that, I mean, I personally enjoy working in, and I've got technicians that love the space, but sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming for some. So, so it's extremely difficult. And, I don't know. It's just, I don't know what to do about it myself. I mean, we just tend to just try people and get more people on board and just try and see how they go and see if they've got a genuine interest for it. But, it's a lot for them to learn, and it's a lot to take on. And even if you try and compartmentalize a little bit, like, get a security guy that just does security, they get, just try and separate it out a bit. That helps. But again, I'm not sure what the answer there is, Paul, but I commend what you're doing, mate. Getting an apprenticeship program or something like that going would definitely help the industry as a whole, because I just don't think the industry is going to slow down at all. And, I thought that the industry would take a huge hit with all of these DIY devices that come out. I thought this was going to be it's going to be over. Nah, it's not. It only bolsters it. And some of these devices are like, okay, this is what it could be like, but it's not fantastic. And then it's like, well, we're going to get a system integrator involved and we're going to make it fantastic. So all these devices do is give the homeowner a taste of what it could be like. Some of them are good, but some of them are not so good. But it's you get for what you get what you pay for, and some of these things are not fantastic. And then it leans into getting a professional involved. And when you're doing your forever home, for example, and you go, well, I just want it done properly. And we're just seeing this happen more and more.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I've been referring to DIY devices as a gateway drug.
100%, 100%.
That's what it is. And integrators who are afraid of them are missing the opportunity here. You need to know exactly what they are, and you need to know their shortcomings.
And I was afraid. I was afraid too. I agree with what you're saying. I was afraid, and then after a while, you realise, no, this is not a threat at all. Yeah, not a threat at all. So yeah, it's definitely a good thing. Definitely a good thing for the industry as a whole. That's for sure. Yeah.
So I'm wondering then, you obviously have a different view of the industry to a lot of people because you sit both on the supply side as well as the integration side. So is there, I guess, one thing that you notice the industry is doing that you would love to see change?
No, nothing that sticks out at this point. I mean, no, I mean it's things have just been evolving at the rate they are. I mean, everything is dependent on the technology available at the time. So I think the trajectory has been pretty good. The only element that the biggest element that makes our industry, well, to be honest, it's probably good that it does. That makes it limiting is just price. Everything is still, all of this technology is super expensive. But I think it's only a matter of time before DALI light fittings are going to be pretty close to the price of a standard dimmable downlight. I think that's only a matter of time. And when something like that starts happening, the shift just from a reduced amount of cabling perspective, the reduced amount of labour to install, it's going to be a no-brainer. People will shift into that space, and all your conventional electricians, that are wiring strappers and two-way, three-way, four-way switching, when it can be just done with a twin by a DALI and a single lighting chain, just ding, 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 like that's just going to, from a labour perspective, what they'll save there will eat. And when the cost of the light fitting is almost on par with a traditional light fitting, I think this will just start to push the industry hard in that direction. And then on top of that, when you've got your DALI there's lots of gateways that can go to your, to your visualization, to different visualization servers, and this just brings all these houses online. So it's just a matter of time. I think it's just going to be a forced change. But when I say forced change, I mean it's just going to be just because of it's economically more viable to go down the path of wiring it that way than wiring it traditionally.
Yeah. You obviously mentioned there's a lot of different gateways that people could have access to. There's a lot of different systems they need to be aware of. So I'm wondering, as someone who's been in the industry for a while, how have you actually been able to, I guess, stay up to date with all the changes, and actually, where do you turn for information?
Yeah. Look, I mean, we normally go to a significant trade show that runs. We normally go every 4 years, and just keep abreast of things. And anyone that's sort of serious in the space tends to exhibit there. But it's hard. Sometimes you get customers that find some things and show it to you. And I encourage customers to do their own research, but you do have to say no to a lot of things because, you get presented with so many options, and, sometimes you need to keep it a little bit safe and go with what you know and what you're confident in. But sometimes things pop up and you go, wow, this is something worth investigating. You might purchase a device and give it a go and see what the outcome is. But what, in my opinion, we're seeing, we think the uptake of obviously, Apple and Google are going to be, probably the more significant standout ones, and they've kept it really simple, to be honest. It's I think whatever integrates with those is pretty important, and then whatever other third party integration systems there are, there's a lot of good ones out there too, but. People are most familiar with the with Apple and Google, I guess.
Yeah, and it's always a smart idea to go where the people go, and if
that's
they're
right,
the ones that have the devices,
and often you'll be driven by that. For example, we did a 5 luxury apartment complex, and the the spec was it must all integrate with HomeKit. Like the owner didn't care about anything else. It was like, okay, but you're just that one apartment. Like, what about the other 4? So, we chose to go with a Matter standard, which was obviously integrates with both options. It just gives you, and you've got to think about that, resale of a building. Like, if it only operates with Apple HomeKit and the person that's going to purchase it is an Android user, like, he's got to be pretty miffed. So, you've got to be a bit, try and keep it as open as you possibly can. But in saying that, if the backbone is Dali or KNX, etc., you can always gateway to something else. But it's nice to when you design the system from the get-go for it to be open to both standards all the time. It's definitely a plus.
So I guess that kind of brings us to the end of this conversation. Where can people find out more about Tecport, about Zennio, and get in touch?
Yeah, sure. Well, Zennio.com would be the best place to find out information on Zennio product and equipment and what's available. Pretty much, everything's stocked here in Australia. So if anyone needs any urgent products, they can get their hands on them. They can. There's the tecport.com.au website for us at Tecport. If there's any end users there that are listening to the podcast. System integrators. We're here to help, and we really want to encourage as many integrators as possible to get into the more open standards. And if there's assistance required from us, we're happy to help, and we've made a lot of mistakes. So if there's issues, we're happy to chat about it and try and help you overcome it and provide any advice on these elements. Like I said, we were sort of strong-armed into the integration space because, 18 years ago we couldn't sell any product. It was just impossible. So we decided to engage and get our own jobs and move forward in that way. But nowadays we do obviously have a huge presence in the space of just selling pure product, and we obviously want to focus on that more and more as we're moving forward and support these guys and make these projects better and better. But yeah, so Zennio.com and Tecport.com.au, you'll find us on and reach out by all means if you need anything.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate you being here.
No problems at all, mate. Nice to have a chat. Fantastic.
That was Peter Milojkovic from Zennio Australia and Tecport. And I hope that conversation gave you something genuinely useful to take back to your business. A few things I'll take from this one: the story Peter told about his early platform manufacturer going under. It's a useful reminder that having open protocol options in your toolkit, whether as the primary layer or alongside other systems, gives you flexibility that a single vendor approach doesn't always allow. That's not a reason to abandon platforms that work well. It's a reason to think about how open standards complement them. The concept of systems thinking he described, getting HVAC, lighting, access control and security onto a common platform so they can influence each other, that's the value proposition that separates what we do from a Sparky running some smart switches. But as Peter acknowledged, it comes with a coordination problem that nobody in the industry has fully solved yet. The key insight: win over the other trades by solving their problems, not by explaining yours. And on maintenance, the reframing of maintenance contracts to "we're coming every couple of years to replace your alarm battery and do a systems check" is a simple but genuinely useful piece of language. Don't underestimate how much the framing matters when you're trying to build recurring revenue. Finally, and I thought this was worth restating, Peter's take on DIY devices. He was afraid of them. Most of us were. But his view now is that they're market development. They give people a taste of what's possible, and the good ones confirm the value, while the not so good ones send people looking for a professional. Either way, as an industry, we win. A big thank you again to our sponsors, ADI Global, Sonets, distributed by Amber Technology, Coliseum, and Connected Magazine. Please support the businesses that support this show and support our industry. Thanks for listening to Master Integrator. I'm Paul Skelton. I'll see you next time.